A quick reminder, Wi-Fi information and the URL for feedback surveys can be found on your schedule. Please remember you can send an email to safety@DrupalCorn.org if you have any concerns. If there's an emergency, please call 911. Thank you for coming to Make Search Work. Please help me welcome Michael Smith, Technical Architect at VML.
Thank you. I don't have to press the button because she already did. It's good because I would have forgot. So this is Drupal Search, or Making Search Work. It's apparently what I put in the title whenever I signed up for this, but it probably wouldn't fit on the screen. My name is Michael Smith. I am a technical architect at VML. You'll see we have VMLYR everywhere because we just changed our name on Wednesday. So I spent yesterday switching all my slides around, updating new names. And this is going to talk about Drupal Search. A lot of times, search is one of those things that we put on websites kind of as an afterthought or just a checkbox. Somebody says, we need search on our website, and we are good Drupal developers, and we say, well, there's a module for that. So we go install a module, and we say search is done. And nobody's ever happy when we do that. We're not happy with the way it works, and the client's not happy with the way it works. Because it's just one of those things that's a lot harder than we think it is. So this presentation is going to be split up into two parts, the planning and the building part. The planning, I think, is probably the most important part of search. So we'll talk a little bit about, do we even need a search on our websites? What type of search are we looking for? And really try to figure out the modules and the different search things that we need. And in the building part here, we'll actually talk a little bit about using Solr and the Search API module and views to build a search, and some of the gotchas and things that we need to remember to do. So the first part here, planning. As I said, please let me know if I speak fast. By the way, I have a habit of doing that. Just tell me to slow down. We are very quick as developers, at least those of us at my company, of just jumping in, opening a code editor and slapping some modules in and getting into the code. We don't spend a lot of time thinking about what we're actually going to build. That's just because we're nerds and we like building things. We don't like planning things. But search is really one of those ones that we need to plan. The first thing that we need to plan on search is to actually question the need for search. Does my website actually need a search, or does my client's website need a search? Everybody, again, it's a checkbox. We need search. Why do you need search? If you have a 6-page marketing site, there's a good chance you don't really need search on that web page. But the business need is always going to be, well, we need search. So you're going to have to put it out there. But as good stewards, we're going to ask why. So the first thing that everybody thinks of when they think of search is Google. Google has kind of ruined our lives for search because they're so darn good at it, and everybody expects their website to be searched just like Google. The problem is, that's what I think of when I think of search, and this is what I use when I'm searching something. The problem is Google has like 1 million engineers working for them and some really big data sets, and that's how they make search work so well. And as we all know, they keep their search algorithms very private as well, so we never know exactly how they're searching things and how they're making things relevant. But they do search very, very well. And then when we put a search on a website, the client says, well, it doesn't work like Google. And I say, well, I'm sorry, I'm not Google. Let's get into some specific details of what you want and how you want it to act like Google, and we can make it act a little better. So Google is a great search. It works really well. You look up Drupal, we get all of these different articles for Drupal here. It has relevancy scores based off of how many times people have linked to it, how many times it links out to other pages, the number of keywords matches that it finds on the site, the number of people that actually visit it, so it uses analytics, all types of really fun stuff. And we just can't really do all that very well, again, because they have really big data sets and we don't. But this is search. This is what people are looking for. So it's a good search. So if I come to VML's website here, I'm going to look for careers. The first thing I'm going to do is, I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I'm going to hit Command F. Can't really see it well. I'm going to hit Command F or Apple F, and I'm going to search careers. And it's not on the page. That's a problem. So the easiest way to fix searching is make it so your content's really accessible. Look for it on the page, right? If you want somebody to find careers, put a link to careers somewhere, because this is the first thing that us as nerds are going to do is hit Command F. A lot of non-nerds probably won't do it, but this is the first thing that we are going to do, so make sure that if you want people to find stuff, it's actually on the page somewhere. The second way as nerds that we're going to do is we're going to go right back to Google and we're going to type in VML careers. We're not going to use a search button. Why? I mean, why have a search button? Google does it really well. So if you have a small site, I wouldn't even spend time making a search. If Google will do it for you here, you can just type in the name of the website and what you are looking for. Works really, really well. The second way to get people to find things on the site is by having good intuitive navigation. This is not an example of intuitive navigation, it's just an example of navigation. We don't need search if everything is in a good information architecture and you can find it by going through the links on the page. Why, again, if I have 20 pages on my website, why do I need a search? I can find it through navigation. So the two first parts here really question, do I even need a search? I guess just the one first part. Do I need a search? Can I build my pages without them? Most people are going to say, nope, check a box, we still want to search. Show them that we don't need to have it all the time. Another way that we can do search is Spire Energy is a gas company. And so they don't have a search on their webpage. Even though they have probably around 100, 150 pages, they don't have a search. They have this thing right here, it's natural language navigation, and they called it search. So when they came to us, they said, we want search. And we said, well, you don't really want search, you just want people to find out how to pay their bills, or find out how to see their bill, or whatever. So this is called natural language navigation. It's not search, it is just a bunch of taxonomy on the page that looks like search. So we can fake it. We don't need search, we can just find other solutions like this. The cool thing about this is view my gas consumption is always going to take you to the same page, and I don't have to risk users finding the wrong page when they look up search, or search not coming back with the correct thing that they're looking for. So this is a really cool, elegant solution that helps clients whenever they say, when I look up view my rates, I want to find this one specific page. This works really well. So again, this isn't search, this is just using some sort of taxonomy on the page and some JavaScript. Other times we'll have things like this. This is not search either. It looks like search, but it's actually just a big view that has filters on it. Lots of times we don't need actual full text search, and this is looking for boom lifts with a bunch of filters over here on the side. It's Drupal views, it's not search at all. Looks like search, but we don't need it. So again, look for ways that we can do it without using search and actually say, do we need to go through the whole process of setting up a search? Sometimes we do. Anybody want a boom lift? Sometimes we actually do want search. There's a lot of articles on a page. It's a good idea to have a search, and this is an example of a very basic search. There's no filtering, there's no facets, there's no changing the order based off of relevancy or date or any of that fun stuff. It's just simply looking something up and displaying results. Very simple. And then sometimes search looks like this, and it gets really complex. But the good news is Drupal can do this. I don't think Amazon uses Drupal, but Drupal can do this. And I do have an example later that looks a lot like this. With this type of search, we're doing full text searching up here. We have our sort bys here. We can go featured, relevancy, date, stars, etc. Facets or filters on the far side over there. We can sort by Amazon Prime and other things over there. I can't read it on this projector. We have different displays. These are display modes in Drupal. So that's just an example of what a full featured search is, and we can actually do that in Drupal. So again, when somebody says, I want search on my page, just really think, do we want search, and what type of search do we need? Do we need a real search, or can we fake it some way? Faking it is almost always better than searching because it's faster and I can be very specific with my results. I have another presentation about performance. It's all about faking it, by the way. Fake everything. Okay, So now we decide we do need search. So we need to think about what are we searching. Drupal websites have a long list of content types a lot of times. Generally, we don't want to search the entire site. We want to be very narrow with what we're searching. Search for articles, press releases, blogs, landing pages, those things. We probably don't need to search for polls and RSVPs and web forms, all that fun stuff. So we need to go through, do a content audit or a content type audit and think about what we're actually searching for. A good rule of thumb is that you should only search for things that have a full URL that is themed. So if I have taxonomy terms that I can't actually get to the taxonomy term, they should not be searchable because there's no way to actually visit that page when I find it in search. It's not always true. Sometimes we do redirect people or we don't provide a click-through on the search, but look for pages or look for content types that have full pages and are viewable. Events would be another good thing that we don't always want to search for. A lot of times we have events that don't have full pages. They're just inside of a view on a page. And so they shouldn't be searchable as individual types. They can be searchable on the page that they're on or by linking through to something. But they shouldn't be searchable by themselves. And then after we've decided which content types, or entity types, I guess, so we can search for users, we can search for taxonomy, we can search for content types, even paragraphs and bricks we can search for. Then we need to figure out what actually on the content type are users thinking of searching for. We probably don't need to worry about indexing image attachments generally, or file attachments. Sometimes we do, but not always. So we need to go through with our business owners and our user experience folks and actually decide what on a piece of content or what on a page is a user really interested in finding. And those are the things that we're going to index. There's no need to index extra stuff because that'll just mess up our relevancy scores when it comes back from the search engine. Won't have any idea. Lots of fields. This is, I have no idea what this is. I think this is on one of our internal sites. Just pulling screenshots. So keep in mind that we don't actually have to index all of these fields. If all of these fields are displayed on a page, we can index the full HTML view of that page, which is generally a lot easier and, in my opinion, better than indexing specific fields, unless we want to boost specific fields, which we'll talk about in a bit. Another thing that we can do is we can create multiple indexes on a page. So just because we have search doesn't mean we only have to have one search. This is the page that actually has 4 searches on it, so 4 different indexes. We have users, groups, articles, and then general pages. So it's 4 different indexes. And this is just kind of a summary page. If I actually click in on one of these, like view all groups or view all users, I will go to a search page that just has users or just has groups. So when you're planning your search, think about that. Do I need one search or do I want multiple searches? You can combine them too. You can look up users in 4 or 5 different indexes if you want. You don't have to have them just in one. David Mitchell's our biggest user of search. That's why I put him in there. David, if you're watching, you're in here. I don't think he is. And then we want to look to see about the facets and the filters that we'll be using on each one of our search pages. Decide if we need them. Do we need that simple search that we saw on Tyson, or do we need to have different ways to filter down our results? You can see that we have, segments and cooked states and different types of things. And then the other one here is the sort by. This actually comes from Amazon, so it's featured, price, average customer reviews, and newest arrivals. Our normal search, our average search, I would say, is going to be sorted by relevancy, and relevancy is a score that each result gets based off of these search terms and the filters. It's calculated generally by the number of times that a search term is found on the page with various boost levels that we'll talk about. But sometimes we want to be able to change the sort by oldest first, newest first, relevancy, sponsored content, price, all types of different things that we can sort on. So think about that when you're designing your search pages. What am I actually going to be wanting to sort by? That's probably one of the biggest ones that we see from business users is, well, I searched for Tyson and I got an article from 7 years ago. Why? Because it's got Tyson written in it 30 times. So relevancy is the most relevant. Sometimes, though, they want to see the most recent, not the most relevant. And sometimes the most recent is the most relevant. And then finally, we need to make sure that everything that we want to search has a display mode and has a way that can be themed, and that it looks good on mobile here. A lot of times you'll get back from your creative what a page looks like and it's full glory on a page, and they say, now make it searchable. Okay, what do you want it to look like when it's returned in the search results? I don't know. Okay, well that's not going to work. So make sure that every content type, every taxonomy, every user has some sort of a theme that we've thought out. It's a good idea to kind of make them all look the same. Always have an image on one side with text on the other, things like that. Otherwise your page looks all jumbled and it's weird. So there you go. That is planning. Oh, again, make sure we have a mobile view as well. 50% of our customers are generally on mobile devices. And all of your search stuff, if you have filters and facets on desktop, make sure you have it on mobile. Because mobile users, if it's important enough to be on desktop, it's important enough to be on mobile. Okay, that's planning. Any questions on planning? Perfect. Now we will talk about actually setting search up, or the infrastructure of setting search up. So now we know that we need a search, and we have to pick the best strategy to create our search. And we're really going to focus on one, but we'll talk a little bit about some of these other ones. And the first one is that we're not going to use a search. So that's the easiest strategy. No search, we'll use views, or we'll use something else, or we'll use Google. Second strategy is that we can use a database search. Database searches uses your MySQL database or your Percona database or whatever backend you have in Drupal. Creates all the indexes in specific tables. It doesn't just do a full text search with a like query. It does actually create indexes. It's not as fast as using an external search like Solr, and it's a little bit less advanced. You can't do different types of searches. You can't do document searches. You can't do distance searches, geolocation searches, things like that. But it works. It's a little slower. One of the biggest Drupal sites that uses database search is Drupal.org. Whenever you search for something in there, in the bug issue queues, or you search for a module or an article, that's all using database search. There's no Solr or anything. So it does work, and it can be very performant as long as you set it up in the same way and don't want to do a lot of weird searches. The second way is using Solr. And Solr is my preferred way to do search. It's, I think, most people's preferred way to do search. Drupal has a long history of using Solr. Solr is a search program. It's external to Drupal, written by the Apache Foundation. You can use it for any sites. It doesn't have to be Drupal. You can put it on Sitecore, AEM. Is AEM Sitecore? I don't remember. WordPress, anything. Solr also can index multiple sites. So if I have some SharePoint content and I have some Drupal content, or I have a multi-site of Drupal, I can put them all in the same Solr server, same Solr index. That gets a little bit more custom, and we're not going to really talk about how to do that here, but you can do it. You can create different search algorithms. So there are different ways to calculate relevancy scores. Solr supports a lot of them. Can search documents, so PDFs, Word, things like that. We've done that a few times. Also, it works really well with Acquia and Pantheon. They both have Solr offerings, so you can, whenever you create a site with one of those guys, say, I want to have a Solr server, and they'll set it up for you, and it works magically with Drupal without anything extra happening. And then you can also go with pretty much any different backend that you can think of. I just put 3 random ones I found here. Elasticsearch, Google Search Appliance, which no longer works. If you have a legacy Google Search Appliance, it does work, but they aren't offering new keys. And Algolia, I think we've had a few clients use Algolia before. But there is a module in Drupal called Search API that's very, very pluggable. And if there's a search engine, somebody's probably written a plugin for Search API to work with it. I know all of these have them. And we'll talk about that. I'll show you a list of all of them here in a moment as well. So our solution is almost always Solr. We talked about this a moment ago. Solr gives us a lot of flexibility. Do document distance, we can do multiple indexes, multiple sites, all of that fun stuff. So what ties all these together is a module in Drupal called Search API. In Drupal 7, there were 2 ways to do Solr searches. You could use Search API with the Search API Solr module enabled, or you could use the Apache Solr module. Both work, but I always recommend using the Search API module because it's pluggable and there's a lot of modules out there that work with it. In Drupal 8, I think the Apache Solr module is gone, so we just use the Search API module and the Search API Solr module. The Search API module has a whole list of pluggable backends that we just talked about over there. So it looks like you can do some Mongo database searching, fuzzy searching, Sphinx, all types of different backends. It also has a lot of plugins for the front end of it. So we can do things like fuzzy searches, facets, views, filters, autocompletes, different types of sorts, different types of context, Ajax searching, all types of great plugins that work with it. Excuse me. Drupal Search, DrupalSear.ch is actually a website that is maintained by the Search API module maintainers, so you can go log in there and play with Search and actually see it working on a Drupal site if you just kind of want to play with it with all the different extensions. It's a really great module, and it's what I'm going to recommend that you always use, that and the Apache Solr extension to it. So we'll talk about the servers and the indexes that we use inside of Search API. Remember that our servers, unless we're using the database server back or the database search backend, our database or our search servers are external to Drupal, and so we have to actually send information to them. DrupalCorn handles this, or we index things immediately, but Drupal API or the Search API module handles all of that. So we need to set up our server externally to Drupal. So that's the first thing that we have to do after we decided to use Solr. The best way, in my opinion, to use Solr is to use some sort of service that does it for you, because we are Drupal developers. We're not tech ops, and I'm sure we all have tech ops and we all have kind of DevOps in our backgrounds. But there is a lot of stuff that goes into setting up Solr that I don't want to deal with, and I'll bet you most developers don't want to deal with either. It is a Java application. There are lots of different schema files that you can change and change the way the Solr works. So the best way is to use a service. Acquia and Pantheon both, again, have a service that whenever you get a subscription to one of them as a site, they will give you a Solr server, at least if you ask them and pay them for it. I always recommend Acquia because that's what we use. Although we use Pantheon as well. And if you don't use one of those, you can still go find another SaaS solution here, which is just a Solr service that is maintained by somebody else, even if it's external to your website hosting. That first one is Web Solr. They don't have their name in their logo, or at least I couldn't find one. SearchStacks and Open Solr, these are just a couple of the ones that I found whenever I was looking around. There are other ones. Buying as a service here, I think, is always a great idea because we don't have to maintain it. I love DevOps, but if I don't have to maintain a server, I don't want to, ever. Setting it up locally, so for your own local testing, does anybody here use Doxil? Carl does, that's good. Doxil is a combination of Docker servers that we use it's just a bunch of bash scripting around Docker containers to give us different type of Docker containers with things pre-built in it. Doxil is a wonderful setup that we use at VML. If you haven't used it, I recommend you do so. There, I think, is a discussion in here later in this room talking about Doxil, so you should go to that. But the good thing about Doxil is it has pre-built Solr built into it. All you have to do is tell your Doxil YAML file here that you want a Solr server, and it spins it up for you and gives you all the configuration and everything. So it's really, really easy. Nothing extra to be done, which is great. It used to be a lot harder for us to get Solr working locally. This has made my life so much better. Inside of Solr, there is a Schema XML file, and this tells Solr how to index things and how to search for things and what types of different indexes you can have. Like integers and strings and floats and all types of fun stuff that's kind of beyond the scope of this presentation. Just be aware there is a schema.xml file, and the Search API module comes with the schema.xml file. Just pull it out of the module folder, give it to your tech ops guy and say, hey, put this in the right place. Or if you go with one of those services, they already have it, and you don't have to do anything special. Just tell them that you have a Drupal site. But it is in the module file if you need. You can also go in here and play around with things if you need to for performance reasons, or you want to change the way that Solr does searching, you want to make it do document distance, things like that. It's all inside of the schema.xml file. Please look around in it. It is very long and very schema-y. I personally just normally use the default one unless there's a real good reason not to. So then we'll want to install the modules after we have our server set up somewhere, or we have a service. We're going to go install our modules. We always need the Search API module, and then again, if we're using Solr, we're going to need the Solr Search module that just gives it the Solr backend. If you're using Acquia, Acquia has the Acquia connector module and the Acquia connector search module, which plugs into Search API and makes it just work seamlessly with their hosting environment. So whenever I connect my new site to Acquia, it sets up all the Solr for me. I don't have to worry about copying strings around and ports and usernames. It just works. It's a great thing. Search views. If you are still using a Drupal 7 site, Search API does not integrate with the views module by default, so you'll need to grab the Search views module. It's really easy to install, and then it gives you all of your search capabilities as an actual view, and that makes it easier for us to filter, create search pages, all those fun things. And then the facets module is what gives us all that filtering on the left side that you guys saw. It's a really good module. We can filter on anything that we're indexing. It comes with a wide range of different HTML controls, checkboxes, drop-downs, radio buttons, HTML links, has all those things built in, and it is pluggable, so you can build your own facets if you want. If you need a dragger to give you a price range, things like that, you can build those inside of facets. It works really great. There are a ton of other modules out there: multilingual, autocomplete, document searching, distance searching, fuzzy searching, synonym searching, all types of fun things. Some things work better than others. Fuzzy searches has always been one of those ones that's little might work, might not. Okay, so the modules are installed. Now we're going to go to the Search API configuration page, which is under Configurations, Search and Metadata, Search API. And you'll see that we have servers and indexes. Again, we can have as many servers as we want and as many indexes on a specific server. Server is that actual Solr server that we just set up. It's just the connection information into it. An index is the information that we are indexing and what we will search against. This comes from the same page we saw that had 4 different searches on the same page, the users, the groups, etc. So you'll see we have indexes for all of those, and they all index and return results in different ways. You can, of course, enable and disable them. These are our old ones, these are our new ones. We just rebuilt all of this like 2 weeks ago on one of our internal pages. Somebody wrote a version that talked to SharePoint that nobody could figure out how to use, but you can do it in Solr. We just didn't know how to configure it after he did it 3 years ago. So we had to rebuild it all using just Drupal. Takes a little bit of wrapping your head around it. So inside of the server, when we set up our server here, we have a Drupal 7 version on the far side and a Drupal 8 version over here. The Drupal 8 version also has Acquia built in, so you can see I just said use Acquia, and it did all of the stuff for me. I didn't have to worry about it. So use Acquia if possible. I don't know if there's a Pantheon module that connects that way or not, but I imagine there's something. It's pretty easy to set up the host, the port, protocol, and it'll be set up. And then we have our view of it here. Gives us all the information we need to know, the actual API or the actual server address for your Solr environment. Inside of the Solr environment, you can hit that independently. So if I go click on this link, I will be taken to a page where I log in. If I have the login credentials, then I can run queries against the server and see more information about the Solr server outside of Drupal. It's its own web page, which is oftentimes really useful when you're trying to figure out why a search is returning what it's returning. You're like, that shouldn't be returning this thing here. So it's useful to go in and kind of play around with queries and see what you can do. Lets you know that you're actually connected to the server, and then it tells us all the items that are actually indexed here. Important part there is where it says delay. By default on a Solr server, you have 2 minutes before updates are actually searchable. So whenever I send information to Solr, it'll be 2 minutes before the query actually comes back with that information. Inside of the Solr schema files, you can actually change that time limit. I am not versed enough in Solr to know why we normally have a 2-minute delay, but there is a 2-minute delay, and I'm okay with just knowing that. Anybody have any idea why?
I can explain it, but it's technical in terms of the buckets and having to combine them back together. It really makes sense to, if you're doing a bulk load of loads.
Makes sense. So there we go. You can also delete everything and start over. That's a good thing to do. There's a tab at the top that'll actually allow you to see the Solr schema file that's used as well. If you click on the tab, it'll show you the schema file if you're just curious what it's using. After we set up our server, now we get to set up our indexes, and we can set up as many indexes on a server as we want. The most important thing here is that we select the bundles, and the bundles are the content types that we talked about before. Select the server we're using, and then an important part here is the index options. So again, this Solr server has all this information in it, and it's not scanning your Drupal site every time it's doing a search. We're passing that information to Solr. Solr's building an index, and that's how it works so fast. And so that is all that information is sent on cron. So however often your cron runs, that's whenever updated information gets sent to your Solr server. If you got it once a day, just keep that in mind. If I make a change, I'm not going to see it until tomorrow. You can check this box right here that says index immediately. So as soon as I do a save on a node, it's going to send that information to Solr. That has performance implications because it is using a hook save, hook node save, whatever it's using. And it's going to make a curl call to Solr, so it could potentially time out. Depends on your setup. So keep that in mind that it will work based off cron by default, but you can change it. You can also make your cron faster. There's also a drush command that you can say, send all this information to Solr, and you can set that up on a system cron so it runs more often than your Drupal cron. It's another performance thing. Don't put everything on Drupal cron. Put it all on its own crons. And then the cron batch size here sets by default, I think, to 50. That's useful if you're having problems with memory timeouts for some reason, or you're having a large amount of data that you're indexing. Sometimes you don't want to try to index 50 things at a time. You might want to index 10. If you have very small content types, you might want to index 250 things at a time. It'll just make your initial indexing faster. Play with those numbers. Leave it to default is what I always do, unless there's a reason to change it. And of course, read-only is important whenever I'm moving environments and configuration doesn't change for some reason. But with configuration in Drupal 8, that's rarely a problem. Or if search is broken and we need to stop it from trying to index stuff, read-only button's a good friend. Sometimes that happens. Okay, so we set up our index. Now we have to add fields. So we get to tell Drupal what information to actually send to Solr. The most important one, in my opinion, is always the rendered HTML output. So this will take the actual output on your page, it'll build it, render it, and send it to Drupal, or send it to Solr. This is where we start hitting some of our performance impacts because it has to actually render the page before it sends it. So if you have something weird with a YouTube video that's making a curl call to actually get the YouTube thumbnail or something, things start to get slow. So that's where the index immediately and the batch sizes come into effect. That one's the best one. I always recommend doing that. You can use any type of field that you have on the content type, including the title, the URL, and meta descriptions. Meta descriptions, title, URL are all pretty important to send because that's the same thing that Google's going to use, and so that's what people expect. We can send the type. Most of the time we're going to want to send full text. That allows us to do substring searches. So if I look for Philly cheesesteak will return, as opposed to doing an exact match. We can send integers, floats, all those fun things. So we can do prices on our facets, all that. And then we have the boost field here. Boosting allows us to say that one field is more important than another. So a very simplified way of how search works is that if I have the word VML on the page 6 times, that page is more relevant than the page that has it 3 times if I look up VML. So it's just a counter. Boost will say, if I make it so that every time VML is found in this field, as a boost of 5, then every instance will be counted as 5 instead of 1, whereas in the title it's only counted as 1. So we'll normally want to boost things like title or URL, because that's way more important than how many times it pops up in the blog post. That is kind of a magic value that you just kind of play with. Use your user experience folks if you have them to kind of help you work on that and think about how you are. I just remembered something that I didn't put in the planning phase. How you are searching. I'm going to pause a moment and talk about another thing in the searching phase. I had this entire presentation, but it wasn't very pretty, so I rebuilt it, and I just completely forgot to put this in there. But a good part in the planning phase is to think about search terms. If I look up X, I should get Y. Your user experience people and your business people know what they want to see, so it's a good idea to get actual use cases. And then during development, play with your boost values until you get what they want. Always question, what are they looking up and what are they expecting as results? Can't believe I forgot that slide. It's like the most important part of planning. The full HTML field here, again, this renders. This can come back to bite you if you use things like Angular or Vue.js to render all of your content. If you're not doing server-side rendering, then that's not going to get rendered and not get sent to Solr. So just keep that in mind. If you're using one of those JavaScript rendering engines, it's probably not going to render before it gets sent to Solr, which means searching is harder. Just be aware of that. Not saying don't use those frameworks, just use them where they're needed and where they're not going to be searched. So we can, at the very top of that last screen, there's a button that says Add Field, and I can grab literally any field that's defined in any content type here and add it to the index. After we've sent we've picked all the information that we want to send to the index, then we get to work on the processors here. The processors tell our search queries to do different things. One of the most important ones here is HTML filter. If you're doing a full HTML search, then if you have a FFFFFF, and that's actually in a serial code somewhere, well, every time somebody uses that in HTML, it's also going to be returning the search results. So make sure that you turn on HTML filter, and then we only are searching visible stuff, not all the extra HTML information. We also have entity status. That's published, non-published. Generally don't want to return results for unpublished items. Ignore case is important. Ignore characters can be important. Sometimes stemmers is actually interesting, so you can do mex, text-mex, things like that, different stem words. Dead, dying. And you can actually create your own facets or your own processors here as well. This one's actually a UPC formatter that makes it so that when somebody looks up a serial code that has leading or trailing zeros, it adds them or removes them automatically depending on the needs. So you can create your own different formatters here, and it's pretty cool. With the boost that we were talking about before, this one's actually pretty cool. H1s are generally way more important than H2s, so we can boost those specifically too. We say if the word is in an H1, it's probably way more important than if it's an H4 down the page. So we're saying give that a value of 5 instead of a 3 or 2 there. Same with strongs and bolds and all the different tags inside of HTML. Okay, so now our Solr server is set up. We have indexes. They're all indexing. Things are working beautiful. We need to make it so that people can actually search for things. And we do this by using the views module. Again, with Drupal 7, you have to download a separate module to make it work. Drupal 8, it just works with Search API. Everybody here has probably used a view before, so we just go and create a view. Instead of showing content, you will pick the index that you want to search. So if I have 5 indexes, there'll be 5 indexes there that I can select from. And then we have the option of creating a page or a block. Your normal inclination is going to be, well, it's a search page, let's create a page for this. I don't recommend doing that. We do that sometimes. I prefer to make blocks. That way I can place multiple search pages on one page. I can add meta information on a page. I can use them inside of a paragraph or a brick. All types of fun stuff. So I always recommend a block over a page and then just using the block layout to place my block where I want. So I'd make a search page that's just a blank page and then add the block to it. Once you have a view created, this is actually created as a page, even though I just said make it as a block all the time. We're going to display it as an unformatted list, and my preference is always to do it as a rendered entity. So over there where it says show, it says rendered entity, and we create a display mode for every content type called search or search index. And this makes it so that every content type can decide how it's shown, as opposed to trying to figure out what fields are on it. Articles aren't going to have the same fields as events, or the same as a blog post maybe. So we let each one of the content types decide how it's going to display instead. The filter criteria, the most important one here is the actual search, is a full text search. We have to make sure we add that and expose it to visitors. So that's what creates the search form. Even if you don't expose it, you can still just create a search form by creating a form, maybe putting that in your header or something. It's just a get, it's not a post. So create the search form, figure out what the search query is, and then create your new form. And you can add other filters there. We have some filters for deleted products and sales views. And then sort criteria. By default, the sort criteria in views is, I think, the time that something was created, the create date. That's not very good for search normally. So if you click add on sort, you'll see content, data sort, or search relevance. So that's the primary search order that we want to use, is search relevance. Make sure it's descending. That way the things that are the most important will be at the top, at least what Solr thinks is the most important. It's just a numerical value. And we can do other things like this particular site here wanted to say promoted content is always on the top. So we added that above relevance, so it doesn't matter if something comes back and it's sponsored, it's always on the top, and then we just add a little tag to it there that says sponsored so that users know that. That's a good idea. If you do change the search order or you add search orders like that, tell the users, hey, this is sponsored. Otherwise your users think, why is that relevant? And you go down a rabbit hole trying to figure out why something is showing up at the top. So expose that information. And then of course the header and the no results. Don't forget to put those in. It's one of the things that is frequently forgotten, is what happens whenever there's absolutely no results, so make sure you add those. With search, we get these tokens here, so it can tell us what we searched for, how many search results it came back with. Pretty normal Drupal views stuff. Any questions so far?
You can also do the no results spell check module where it says, and did you mean?
That's a good. Is that one that comes with Search API?
It's one you can get attached to Search API.
Nice.
It's fun.
It's a good idea. Search API is incredibly powerful. Solr is incredibly powerful. It's the gist of this. The next part here is facets. So facets are just filters. Facets are filters that are done after the search. So I won't actually see information over there that's not been part of the search results. It's all the stuff here on the left. We download a module called the facets module. Works with views, works with Search API. It is not Search API facets, it's just facets. When you download that, you can go to the configuration screen. I'm not exactly sure where it is in the menu, but you go here and you can pick any of these items that you have indexed, and you can create a facet for it. You just create add facet at the top there, and you get this screen here, and you say, what's my source? You give it the index that we created, and then you select the field. If I'm not passing that field to an index, then it won't show up here. So if you're trying to make a search or a filter and you're not seeing it, it's probably because you're not indexing that field. So make sure you index it. And then once you are here, you can select your widget. I talked about this earlier, where there's a list of predefined widgets with a list of links, drop-downs, radio buttons, checkboxes. You can extend those and create your own if you need. There are modules out there that give you some more than just those default ones. It's pretty cool. There are a lot of extra settings on here that you can add. My screen wasn't big enough to take a screenshot of the entire thing and make it visible, although this really isn't readable anyway. But you can do all types of different things, like do and ors. You can do order ascending, order descending. You can pick different content types that it works on, all types of fun stuff there. And that's the facet module. Okay, we're almost to the end, so this actually went faster than I thought. The last part is that we need to make sure that it's pretty. So earlier I talked about the fact that we are going to use a display mode and let each one of the content types or the users or the entities, whatever you're using, decide how it's going to display itself. One of the biggest issues that we always see, not always but frequently see, is that a page is built with bricks or paragraphs, and we don't know which one of those bricks or paragraphs to display inside of search on a search result page. A carousel doesn't look good in search results. A lot of images don't look good inside of search results. So what we frequently do is we give them 2 extra fields. We give them a search title field and a search teaser field. And this is just like the body summary that we used to use a lot whenever we had more template-based stuff. Content editors are free to put whatever they want in these. We can use tokens if we're using the body field to say always use what's in the body field, trimmed, things like that. Search image, if we do it with the image here, then we make sure that it doesn't matter what type of content type it is, we always use the same image style and the same dimensions, and everything looks really pretty on the page. So I recommend always doing that, create an image and create a teaser, and let content authors specifically decide what they want on a search page instead of letting Drupal try to figure it out from all the different stuff you have on that page. Also make sure you index those, right? So the teaser here should be part of your index. Otherwise, they're going to be like, well, that doesn't say anything about Philly cheesesteaks in it. Why is it there? And of course, the most easy thing to forget is to theme our no results found. So it's just at the end of it, make sure you actually theme your no results found in your pagers and your headers. And that is all I have. Finished a little early to speak fast. Thank you guys. And thank you to the DrupalCorn folks for setting all this up, and to VML-YNR for letting me come here. Any questions? Does everybody like search? We'll put search on the pages. Thank you guys.